Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Fallout 76 video. So, today we're taking a look at legendary crafting, and we're going to try and go through pretty much everything if possible. We're going to kick off with random rolling, and then get into attaching and gaining specific effects via box mods. So, Bethesda calls these loose mods, but they come in a box, so box mods. Getting materials needed to craft those with, and we're going to cover 4-star legendary mods as well as a few tips on farming legendary gear. So, lots of stuff to cover. So, kicking off a bit of an overview, several ways to get legendary gear. Obviously, I'm sure many of you know this already. You can take it from legendary enemies. As far as getting something specific goes, that's pretty inefficient, as the spawns generally for legendary enemies are pretty unreliable, and then you get the additional RNG on top. Slightly better is to do events or daily ops or expeditions, which are particularly good ways to go and farm legendaries, but again, still pretty darn random if you're wanting something specific. Another option is to head to Purveyor Murmur down in the ash heap at the Rusty Pick and spend scrip rolling for random legendaries from her. Now, this is expensive and still really too random. I mean, just for one example that I know off the top of my head, if you want a specific 3-star legendary ranged weapon, the odds of getting exactly what you want are something in the order of 1 in 120,000, something like that. Obviously varies depending on what you're after, but that is not really a practical approach, especially given the cost of it. Another option is random rolling at a workbench, which is much better. It gives you more specific results, and you'll always get that on the specific piece of gear that you want, so that definitely narrows it down quite dramatically. But you do have high cost of materials in doing that, and still pretty random. And the best option, which we're working towards here, is crafting specific effects and attaching those to the item you want them on. So, very focused, gets you exactly what you want, but again, we do still have to wrestle with relatively low drop rates, and a lot of setup. Definitely still the best way of doing it, but there's a lot to know about it. So, let's dive onward. Random rolling is where we're going to kick this off. This, in some ways, is actually something you want to do later on, but it's the first part of the construction process, so we're going to start here now. So this allows you to roll legendary effects on a specific item, be that a weapon, piece of armor, or piece of power armor. It narrows the pool of possible outcomes by locking you into a specific item. We're going to use a handmade rifle as an example here. So if you want a legendary handmade rifle, you will always this way get a handmade rifle as opposed to something unrelated that you don't actually want. The effects will be random, but at least you're on the right item. So to do this, you first need a non-legendary version of the item you want to make legendary, in this case a handmade, and you will need to do that by either finding one out in the world, which is a bit of a pain to do, or I would much rather recommend you craft one. If you don't know how to do that, you will need the plan, and I'm not going to go down a list of how to get plans for everything here, because we'll be here forever. So your best bet is to head over to the Fallout 76 wiki and search for the plan for specifically what you want. That wiki has so much information on it, it is crazy, it is an amazing resource, I will link it down below. And yeah, if you want something like a specific plan and want to know where to get it, or specific materials for crafting as well, then that's a fantastic way to get the information. So yeah, description for that one. So, once you have your non-legendary item, take it to the appropriate workbench. You'll probably already be there if you've crafted it. And under the Modify section, you'll get Add Legendary Effects. So we hit that, and you can choose 1, 2, or 3 star to get randomly generated legendary effects. This does require legendary modules, which are the crafting material, and those take a little bit of work to get, but hold that thought, we'll come back to that. When you roll these legendary effects, you get 1, 2, or 3, depending on how many stars you've selected, randomized legendary effects. Now previously, if you didn't like those, you could just hit a re-roll option and roll the whole lot again. That's not there anymore, that option is no longer present. You would have to craft a new version of the item, in this case the handmade, and roll again on that, and repeat over and over if you wanted to randomly roll. Still better than blindly hunting the whole map for a specific drop, and better than the random items offered by the Purveyor as well, in terms of your RNG and odds, but very expensive crafting-wise, and still a bit on the random side. So, we're going to move on from that idea towards the attaching of specific effects that you want. Before we get there, we're going to talk about what you need to roll those random effects on the non-legendary item in the first place, the legendary modules. So how to get those, because you will need them at other stages later on in the crafting process as well. There are a number of different ways, and in fact that's going to be the case for a lot of things here. First up, you can complete public events. Those are the events that come up at the top of the hour, 20 past and 22, and they are open to everybody. They'll come up on your map and you'll get a pop-up on screen when they start. You can also do daily ops or expeditions, and any of those will drop up to 3 legendary modules. Not a particularly efficient way to get legendary modules though. However, a more efficient approach that we'll come to in just a second will result in you sort of benefiting from this whole thing anyway, because you'll be doing expeditions, so you'll get extra ones on top of the more efficient process anyway, just to give you that little extra bump. The best way to do this, really, if you want those legendary modules, is to spend legendary scrip and head to Purveyor Murmur at the Rusty Pick down in the Ash Heap, and, as I say, turn your legendary scrip in for legendary modules. Far more efficient in the grand scheme. Which begs the question, how do you get this legendary scrip? So, again, several options. Certain events have a very, very low chance to drop legendary scrip. Wouldn't take that as an approach, but it exists, so I mention it. You can also scrap legendary items when you have them at a workbench. That will give you a certain amount of scrip back. It's a pretty low rate of return, and though you will want to be scrapping legendary items for other reasons, so good that you're getting a little top up there, it's not really what you want to do if you're deliberately pursuing legendary scrip. Your best bet is to take legendary items and turn them in at a legendary exchange machine. You can find these either at a train station or in the White String Mall, and head to the crafting area and there is an exchange machine there. This is your best rate of return when you're after scrip, which you can then, as I say, take to the purveyor and exchange for legendary modules. Obviously, all of this requires legendary items, and you will need these en masse to engage with this system. So later on, as I mentioned before, we'll be going into some tips for farming legendary items. So stick with until the end of the video, because we've got a few key tips on that point. So, you will need both legendary scrip and modules later in the crafting process in order to attach those specific modules you want to your weapons, or armor, or power armor, and also to craft them. So, bear that in mind. But now that we know how to get scrip and legendary modules, and have rolled and or found a legendary item that we wish to improve, let's get a bit more specific, shall we? We're going to attach legendary box mods, or loose mods, to this weapon in order to get the specific effects that we want. So legendary box mods, these are loose mods, as Bethesda call them, that you can attach straight onto an existing legendary piece of gear in order to change out the effect that is in place for something that you specifically want. These are single-use items. They cannot be removed and they cannot be reused. Once you use them, they're consumed, and that's that. You can subsequently replace them with something else, but you won't get the item back, so bear that in mind. It is also worth mentioning, items that you have attached box mods to will become untradeable when you have done that. You will not be able to drop them, you will not be able to put them in your vendors, and you will not be able to give them to other players in any other way either. So bear that one in mind too. The loose mods, those are tradable, but the actual items that have those mods attached, not anymore. So, attaching box mods, once you've got them, is pretty simple really. You go to the appropriate workbench and you select the effect you wish to replace. So you'll see the first star, the second star, and the third star effect. Pick whichever one you want to change out. It'll open up a drop-down list, and the available box mods you have either in your stash or in your inventory will be highlighted, and the ones you don't have will be greyed out. So pick one of the ones you have, change it for the effect you want, and you will have your upgraded piece of gear. So, how do we get these box mods then? Well, there's several options. One way is to hop around and buy them from other players. Chances are they will have them in their vendors. They will probably be quite expensive, especially if they're good, but a lot of people are selling them, and they tend to sell quite quickly. So you might have to hop around, server hop, and keep looking for a while. When you are on the map looking at camps to head over to and buy things from, you mouse over people's camp, you'll see a drop down that shows what they are selling in their camp. The legendary mods go into the mods section of that tooltip. It also includes mods like suppressors, things like that, and scopes, that sort of style of modification, so not the legendary stuff too. So no guarantee that something there is going to be legendary, but if there's nothing there, there's definitely no legendaries. So that's the one you need to look out for. So another option is to take your legendary items, scrap them at a workbench, and you have a low chance to get one of the effects on that legendary item back as a box mod, which you can then go and attach to another piece of gear. And the third way to get these is to craft them, which ultimately is what we're aiming for. And you do that at a tinker's bench. So, how do we craft them? Well, there's a number of bits to this system. Firstly, you need to know the plan. To get that, you will need to take legendary gear, be that weapons, armor or power armor, to a workbench and scrap it. And when you scrap it, you will get a very low chance to learn the crafting plan for one of those effects. This is the same way you get random box mods from scrapping, with even lower odds. So you might just get a loose box mod, you might get nothing but a little bit of scrip. If you do get the crafting plan, you'll see in the top left corner of your screen, the crafting notification pops up and tells you that you got it. So keep an eye on that corner. But that is basically how you learn the plan. As I say, the RNG on this is not great, it will take a while, but once you have learned the effect, you can craft as many as you like. So, once you've learnt the effect you want, head over to your Tinker's Bench, scroll down to Legendary Mods, and craft the box mod. It is worth mentioning at this point that this system is aimed at endgame players. Theoretically, you could engage with it earlier in the process, but chances are by the time you have the resources in order to properly engage with this, you'll be at the end game anyway, because it takes a while to get there. The crafting materials required for box mods are often quite hard to come by. Some of them more so than others, some of them aren't too bad at all to be fair, but especially some of the most powerful and best modification effects require really rare items in order to craft them, including things like, say, bobbleheads and the like, so they do take a bit of finding. So there is something to bear in mind, and also one of the reasons it's likely to be late game before you have anything to craft with on this front. If you are looking for a specific crafting material, as mentioned before, down in the description, link to the Fallout 76 wiki. Always good to use this to know where to find the crafting materials anyway, as any particular crafting material you need will have sources of it and places you can go to find it listed in the description of that particular material. So yeah, Fallout 76 wiki doing the Lord's work as usual. So once you have crafted your appropriate box mod, head back over to whichever workbench is appropriate for the item you wish to craft. We're looking at handmade rifles, so for us it's going to be a weapons workbench. And then, as before, attach the box mod. And there you go, your customised legendary item. This applies whether or not you're looking at the first star, the second star, or the third star, it's all the same. So, moving onward, as of the end of 2024 and the start of 2025, the Gleaming Depths update has arrived and brings 4-star legendary gear into the game. This is a little bit different to 1 to 3 stars in the way that you access it, so we'll go over that in a bit of detail. I don't have quite so much precise B-roll here, so bear with me a little bit, the images won't quite line up here, but we can give you an overview of how the 4-star system works. So, the crafting system, as I say, is a little bit different. You cannot roll random 4-star items, it's not a thing. You can only roll 1, 2, 3 stars. 4th stars can be added to existing 3-star items if you have a 4th star box mod. So basically you would take your 3-star legendary weapon, as we're looking at here, take it to a workbench and attach a 4th star on it if you had the appropriate loose mod. That turns that 3-star item into a 4-star one and you're off to the races. So how do we get those 4th star effects? Now this is where it gets a little bit more difficult, because you can buy the 4th star box mods from player vendors if they have any. Chances are those will be astronomically expensive though, especially the good ones, as these only come from one location and they are very, very hard to get hold of, so they are likely to be very high value items. Many people may not even choose to sell them for caps, they may go for more rare materials in trade, so bear that in mind. You can scrap 4-star legendary items for loose box mods, same as any other legendary item. That's a possibility. Again, low chance of drop, of course, but it's an approach. And you can also scrap them in order to get the plan to craft the 4th star box mod. Same as before, but for 4th star. And this obviously, as I say, requires scrapping a 4-star legendary item to learn the plan, and then you craft the box mod at a Tinker's Bench and attach as we did before. So, how do we get 4-star legendary items? Whether you want to keep it, scrap it, or whatever. Well, there's only one place, and that is raids. For right now, that's just the Gleaming Depths. They may add more raids later on if this content works out well for them. Personally, I'm not a fan of it, but that's a whole thing I'm not going to get into here. But right now, raids are the only place they come from. It is, of course, worth mentioning, if you're not aware, this is the hardest content in the game. It is aimed at a group of 4 high-level, well-geared players. If that's not you, if you want to play solo or you're not in the late game and already pretty well-geared, you are in for an extremely tough, if not outright impossible time with running these raids. There are certain exceptions to that I hope to get into in a later video, we'll see. But on the whole, it's something you have to engage with in a group very late on in your Fallout 76 career. One little caveat, incidentally, on the PTS in advance of the launch of the Gleaming Depths, 4-star legendary creatures were spawning out in the open world. In low numbers, but they could do it. As of this going actually live, they do not spawn. So 4-star legendary creatures are not available anywhere else. Raids are the only place you will get 4-star gear. That might change in future, given that it was a thing on the PTS, but as it currently stands at time of making this video, raids are the only place. And of course, you might be able to buy them from player vendors if they happen to be selling one of these weapons, or armor, or power armor. So, there we go. Basically, a slightly different version for 4-star to the other crafting and attachment process, but it all ties together and is an extension of that existing system. So that covers everything you need to know in terms of getting the specific legendary item that you want. So, we have a few more tips for you regarding how to get particularly legendaries on a reliable drop rate, and also to kind of speed up your learning of at least some of the effects. So, grinding tips. I did promise, and here they are. So, to get legendary items, you're going to need an awful lot of grinding and setup. You're going to need scrip, you're going to need modules, and you'll need legendary items to scrap for plans and box mods. All of this boils down to a need for lots and lots of legendary items. So the best, most efficient way I have found to do this is basically running expeditions. Because if you run an expedition and complete all of the objectives, you are guaranteed 6 legendary items. They'll be completely random. If you're really lucky, you might even want to keep one. But chances are you probably won't. And you can run one of these at the fastest end in around about 10 to 15 minutes. There's probably a few people out there can run them even faster than that. But generally speaking, that's going to be your ballpark for getting 6 legendary items. So every 10 to 15 minutes is not a bad drop rate for 6. Certain other events come up that have a decent drop rate on legendary items as well. For example, Hunt for the Treasure Hunter, or Holiday Scorched, or Spooky Scorched, that sort of thing. There's a couple of others perhaps as well that have a really good chance of dropping a decent number of legendary items if you want to mix up your grinding approach. Just for once in a while, you know? But generally speaking, expeditions are your best bet. So my advice on how to do this, incidentally, are to head over to a train station and launch the expedition from there, because you'll be coming back here when you finish it. So, you launch your expedition. I've got guides on expeditions if you want to have a look at that, so I'll try and remember to link those around for you. I recommend choosing either tax evasion, which you'll find in Atlantic City in the casino quarter, or the most sensational game, which you'll find in Atlantic City again, in the boardwalk, as these are generally the fastest ones to complete. When you have completed them and done all of the optional objectives, you should be returned to the train station with 6 legendary items. Then you can turn around and head to the legendary exchange machine and get rid of anything that doesn't have any effects you want on it, or maybe particularly heavy, if that's a concern for you. And you can turn those in for script straight away. You could also get rid of any scrap or ammo or stems and stuff that you don't want at either the vendor or into your stash, as there'll be one of those at a train station. If you're a Fallout First player, I recommend dropping your survival tent right outside of the train station as well. Then you can just run over there and use your scrap box, ammo box, and so on. And you'll also have access to a workbench, and you can then scrap any legendaries you want there and hopefully learn the plan while you're standing there. If not, then we just repeat. And basically, that will mean you can get a decent number of legendary drops reasonably quickly on repeat if you would like to do that. So, one last set of tips to talk about quickly is one option for learning legendary effects a little bit more quickly. You can speed up the learning of certain plans by crafting and scrapping unique legendary items. Now, these things come as rewards from daily ops and sometimes from season rewards as well. And you will learn how to craft these things at a workbench. So you would craft it at the bench and then scrap it in order to learn the specific effects that it will always have when you craft it. Some of these are quite good, Some of them are less great, but if there's one of them that's got something specific you want, you can focus on that, for example. It's worth mentioning these do have a fairly high cost in scrap when you're actually crafting them, and some of them actually require legendary modules as well. In fact, I think most of the ones that will work actually do, so in that regard they are quite expensive, but it will narrow down the pool you're drawing from if you have something specific in mind. There's a little pro tip here. If you want to approach this way of doing things, craft one of the item that you are thinking of scrapping first, just a single one, then scrap it. You'll get a notification that pops up that says, are you sure you want to scrap this legendary item, or some variation on that. If it says legendary item, go ahead, this is going to work for you. However, if it says, do you want to scrap this premium item, it will not. Premium items don't give you the opportunity to learn legendary effects on them even when they have them. So bear that in mind. If it's a premium item, you'd be wasting your resources here. So, a couple of examples that you can get from Daily Ops, for example. We've got Unstoppable Monster, Medical Malpractice, Soul Survivor, there's a few others. Generally speaking, which unique legendaries you have to draw upon and craft will depend on the content you have completed through your 76 lifetime. That will vary from player to player, so bear that in mind. But it is an option to chase down a specific legendary effect if you happen to have that option. And there we go. That is a pretty comprehensive, I think, overview of the legendary crafting system as it stands at the end of 2024 going into 2025. And yeah, covers everything from how to get legendary gear right the way through to getting that specific 4-star legendary item that you want. Do hope you folks found that useful and informative. I very much appreciate you sticking with. If you did like the video, please consider dropping subs and likes and checking out all the other buttons down there. We've got channel memberships as well if you want to support the channel directly. I really appreciate that. Make sure you hit that notification bell and then you keep up to date with guides and camp builds and all manner of bits and pieces that we do around 76 here. Hopefully you'll find something that interests you. If you get a chance, join us for live streams as well. We've got Play 76 and a whole bunch of other stuff if you're looking for something to watch as well. So I do hope you'll join us for that. But for now, massive thank you very much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.